Hello, EnderSword here again, this time with a Bronze League game. We're going to be featuring the Protoss player, PablosCruise here. Sounds like some sort of drug boat. And his opponent is going to be the Terran player, Icarus. We're here on Tal'Darim Altar, so pretty big map, usually leads to a lot of macro games. And we do have a pretty long game for you here today, so I'm going to go a little faster through some parts of it. But he did post this game up, Pablo did, on Reddit, and he was looking for some advice on what to do and how to get out of Bronze League. So we're going to take a look at a few key things during this game on how he can improve. First thing that we're going to take a look at is the idea of just building warp gates till you're broke. So you should basically, at any given time, whether you're Protoss or anyone else, be able to use all the money that you have banked up in one big round of production. So if you have 9 warp gates, you should be able to use all the money you have in at least one warp in. If you're warping in entire rounds and you've still got a lot of money left over, then add more warp gates to that, add more robo facilities to that, add something else that is spending and consuming your money, or else you're just kind of leaving things on the table. Your income is too big for what you have there. It's going for the wall off here against the Terran on something that doesn't even have a ramp. I'm not a huge fan of doing that. You can end up kind of getting your own army trapped on the other side of the wall in some cases. It makes it harder for you to move your own army in and out to, say, stop drops and stuff like that. So I'm not a big fan of that type of wall off. I understand it makes some sense if you're worried about Hellions, but I don't like it as a general rule. It just makes your army go in single file when you want to be 2 places at once. Anyway, the second thing we're going to look at is unit composition is your friend. Don't just mass up one type of unit that you're most kind of comfortable with using. In this case, and for a lot of Protoss players, that's just going to mean the Stalker. The Stalker can hit ground units, it can hit air units, you can blink with it. It's a little faster, a little more mobile, you don't have to worry too much about it. But it's also a very weak unit. It's a very cost inefficient unit. It's probably one of, if not the most cost inefficient unit in the game, maybe the carrier. Yeah, the Stalker's just really bad against almost everything, given its actual cost compared to what it does. So you want to be mixing in more Zealots, you want to be mixing in more Sentries, and definitely some of your higher tech stuff as well. But you can make a pretty decent army just out of Zealots, Stalkers, and Sentries, your basic gateway units, if you kind of learn how to use them together, leaving your Zealots in front, using those Guardian Shields, Force Fields, and so on. So especially if you're a player that's in Bronze League right now, try and get used to what it's like to move those other units around and how to get some use out of them so that you'll know and it won't be completely fresh when you hit Gold League and all of a sudden you really need to be using that type of unit. Certainly you can get out of Bronze with just Stalkers. There isn't actually a problem in doing that if you know what you're doing, but it's going to leave you kind of without that key skill set there. Third thing we're going to look at this is the idea of letting a victory turn into a loss. So you've gone in, you've won a big battle or something like that, gained a huge advantage. There's ways to really let your opponent come back and let that completely slip through your fingers. You generally want to use the Artosis type idea of when you're ahead, you want to get more ahead and prevent your opponent from getting farther ahead than they currently are. So try and stop their progress and basically starve them out if you don't feel like you can actually go in to a full frontal assault on them. So just kind of hold them off, make sure they don't take more things, get more advantages while you do get advantages yourself, and basically try and hold them off if you're in a position that they can't really stop you or push back at you, but you have a hard time going in at them, which is very often the case with Terran. If they want to turtle up with a lot of siege tanks and things like that, well, they can. There's really nothing to let you come up a very entrenched position against them, so very often your only option is just, all right, you're on 1 base, you're on 2 bases, but that's all you get. I can't attack right into you. but I'm also just not going to let you come out against me, and we're just going to stalemate with me having 4 or 5 bases and you having 2. Eventually you're going to run out of money. Eventually I'm just going to overwhelm you, things like that. So that's what we want to be focusing on. So you can see at this point in the game, about 13 minutes in, nothing has happened or anything like that. So that's why I kind of motored through the first part of it. There are kind of lulls throughout this game. You get just the classic style of 2 players kind of building up in their own base, not too concerned about the other person. At least Pablos was actually scouting in there with an observer, but he's not making a lot of effort to tech up. These 2 gases aren't being taken. He is just kind of making that mostly stalker army. We've got this immortal trapped in here. For whatever reason, I've actually seen this happen 4 times in games that I've casted on this channel. And each time I tell people, this immortal is worth 250 minerals and 100 gas. This gateway in this pylon, this is worth 100 and this is worth 150. Destroy it. Just destroy something that will let him out of there, because every building that this unit is surrounded by is worth less than the unit itself. Just put down another gateway and destroy this and actually let your unit out of there. Also at this point we can see we've got 4 gateways out on the map. He is upgrading, that's good. He's kind of putting cannons down to see if he can become a little more drop repellent. Finally is going to get these gases. When you build those, make sure you're sending your probes back to the mineral line. Don't just let them wait there the entire time for the gas thing to build. You're just losing mining. But speaking of that, we've got a lot of money going on here, but we're not using the robo facility. All of the gateways are available for use right now, and he's not immediately warping back in. We've actually got more than enough money for 1 round of units plus a robo thing. So good, he is finally getting more gateways going down. At this point, I would actually get even more than this, just because he's allowed his money to stockpile up so much, and he's not using his current ones. One thing that you can do as a lower league player, just overcompensate and get way more production than you would ever see a pro get. Very often the problem is people don't get as much production as a pro level player is going to get. But in reality, you want to get even more than that, because they're not going to miss production cycles and you are. They're not going to make the mistake of letting their warp gates sit here unused for about 2-3 minutes. But you are going to make that mistake as a lower league player fairly commonly. So if you get way more warp gates than you need, that's better. You know that you're going to be floating a lot of money a lot of the time. You know that you're going to get distracted by a battle. You know that you're going to get caught up in doing something else, stopping a drop, whatever it is. So you're going to forget to do this stuff. Just make extra ones so that when you come back and remember and be like, oh, I didn't warp in anything for a while and I've got 1,500 minerals, then all of a sudden you've got 15 warp gates off 2 bases to warp everything in with. And you're going to be that much more ahead. He's not going anywhere with his Robotech right now. He's not really teching up at all. Kind of moving out to just a vague position out on the map. This Marine here, obviously seeing everything that goes. If you're going to be going near one of these sites, take a poke in to make sure that there's no one sitting at the tower watching literally every single move you make. But he goes in for the attack here, and yeah, much bigger army here. You want to try and make sure you're getting close enough that things are actually firing. You can see all these things in the back aren't actually firing. They're just kind of dancing around, so you're getting a lot worse firepower. Icarus decided to attack. I think there's 1 lone zealot in there. It would have been nice to see, say, a wave of zealots coming up front so that the stalkers could save a little damage. Kind of now getting shelled by these tanks over here. It was certainly a good idea not to walk into them, but he's kind of then standing on the outskirts, letting the tanks get free shots off him, actually blinking directly into the tanks. No reason to be standing here in this tank fire. No reason to have gone near that. Really wants to be, the entire fight shouldn't have crossed about this line. he should have immediately swung in this direction and picked off the orbital command from a safe distance. So this is kind of a situation where we went into a fight and had a very massive victory. Pretty much took out all the land army, and know that we're going to get this command center, but by wandering over here really turned that absolute victory into a bit of a defeat. We ended up losing more resources and losing more supply than the opponent did, and now we're back to even. When that fight actually started, the Protoss player was about 30 or 40 supply ahead. Also during that fight, since he did move out to a correct position, it may have made sense to continue warping in and just try and reinforce that so that you actually take this position. There's no reason he couldn't take even another poke at this right now, staying out of sight of these tanks and just stopping this command center from ever going back up. It would be a bit foolhardy to just try and walk through this, knowing that you're going to have to go through all this splash damage, but there's no reason they couldn't stop that command center from going down. Vikings come across here. Obviously the Terran player did just make Vikings kind of blindly. He saw that Robo Bay was down earlier, saw a couple of Immortals out there, and decided, well, he's probably going to go Colossus eventually, so he made some Vikings. When he saw that there were no Vikings in that composition, decides to come across and just land them in the mineral line, which is actually a great reason why Pablo should have immediately gone into Colossus. He now knows that there's tanks out there, but that was mostly just a straight up bio army. There were only a few tanks around. A lot of it was Marines. There's not going to be a large Viking Air Force or anything like that, given that we had spending on the Banshee, spending on the Vikings, and he didn't see any real medevac type stuff. There's finally 2 now, but in that initial assault, no medevacs out there. So certainly Colossus would be a good transition here. He could also go straight into High Templar. It doesn't really matter which path he actually chooses, but you want to pick a path and continue to tech up throughout the course of the game. Don't get stuck on just one technology. Again, we've got that Marine who comes down like a dummy, but he's been watching everything kind of gather up for the entire game. And again, we're just sticking on straight Stalker tech, which is just really bad against the splash damage of a bunch of tanks that are massed up. You can eventually blink on them, but you're not going to do that unless you start to clear out some of the infantry force. It's not as good without a wave of zealots in front of it, without sentries to kind of block some of this army off, and so on. So it just doesn't really make sense. This has been queued all game. The Raven has just been randomly dropping auto turrets in his own base just to kind of use his energy up. You rarely see that, but I think he's kind of letting it go to max energy, and instead of letting it accumulate, I might as well drop an auto turret down. The danger of this, of course, is that a point defense drone or two could certainly just stop these stalkers from doing any damage. There's the blink in. By blinking in like that, all you're really doing is just clumping everything up right in front of a bunch of tanks. You're ignoring the mass Marines there that are really doing a lot of damage. You're just more quickly delivering yourself to the absolute kill zone of the enemy. He literally walked into a position that could not have been a better surround for the Terran player. So basically, if you're blinking into battle at any given point, you're probably wrong. You tend to want to be blinking away. You tend to want to be blinking on specific individual targets, not onto a clump of something, not into a bunch of infantry, not into a bunch of melee units, stuff like that, and certainly not into the range of a bunch of splash units. If you want it to blink onto tanks, that can sometimes be okay, but you'll notice there he didn't blink on them. He blinked a couple feet ahead of them, therefore letting them all just fire in the clump space that you just blinked into. So he's having a little trouble kind of cleaning this up. However, he should be able to do it just with numerous warp-ins. There's really no exhausting that. And again, there's just not enough medevacs to support this, and he's picking them off one by one. So there's just not enough healing there, and obviously with the production on his own side and defensive advantage, he is going to clean that up. Finally, we do get a third base going down. This should have been done 16 or so minutes ago. And there's really no reason not to take this position. Obviously, the Terran was scanning there, but this is a little harder for him to drop from these positions since he'd have to go all the way around, whereas having it here makes it vulnerable to both a drop and just a straight up attack. And given that our Protoss now no longer really has any presence out there on the map, he's vulnerable to both of those things occurring, and he'd be vulnerable to drops in his natural as well as the third. And it's kind of hard on this map to split your army in a way that's really good for that. Best place kind of is around here and try and cover both, or kind of near the watchtower, but then you're kind of leaving a back path as well. So it's not split in the best possible way when you're actually taking this base towards your opponent. Just a little harder to defend that rather than just go for what would have been the natural third. Although in this case, this late into the game with this much money, he really should have been doing both anyway. A lot of probes kind of sitting around idle here that he's not getting use out of. You should know when things are mining out. He's transferred a lot of probes from his one active base to the other base, but we've got these sitting at home. Definitely a lot of money stockpiling up. Probably another couple of robotics facilities, another several warp gates would actually be fine. You see, he just did a full warp in again and still doesn't have enough money to actually spend everything there. We've really got probes just lying around all over the place, and there's just plain not that many of them. Did happen to kill a lot of the Terran SCVs, and Terran's really only on the one base. He's kind of abandoned his main one. So right now you're in that situation where Protoss doesn't really want to be attacking into this sort of thing, but the longer that we're on two mining bases and the Terran is only one, then we're at an advantage, and we're going to end up rebuilding faster than that Terran is rebuilding. And these little bits of harassment like that, he keeps kind of forgetting that he has blink. That's the type of thing that you want to be blinking onto, so that he doesn't just kind of harass and get away with that. Make him pay for that. The robotics bay, not a great spot for this. It's, yeah, kind of hidden, but it's not really hidden. You're going to find that by accident in a moment, and the first attack that comes in there, first thing it's going to do is knock out your ability to make Colossus. Does have his Colossus up here, not rally with his army. Still the Immortal just kind of sitting there literally for the entire game. He's been there about 25 minutes or something like that. All these probes just kind of sitting around idle, not really getting any mining out of here. There's literally 3 guys doing it. We've got, that's weird. Does he have long distance mining on this guy? So okay, he rallied a couple down. That makes sense. Yeah, just weird. And here's kind of that army split that I was talking about. He's not comfortable leaving both bases undefended, but you can't split your army like this as the Protoss player. You're going to have one of his armies end up engaging all together. Just if his whole army hits together, then you don't really have anything there to actually defend against. You don't want to be picked apart piece by piece. Finally, we do get some Zealots there, and you can really see their worth in that. The Zealots there are absorbing that one tank fire. The tank fire then cascades onto the units that the Terran player has. While they're picking them apart, it creates kind of a wall. The Stalkers are in the back doing a lot of damage. The Colossus is in the back doing a lot of damage. The Immortals in the back doing a lot of damage. But they're not the ones taking a lot of the fire. The really cheap Zealots are out front taking that fire. He needs to be making probes even still constantly out of this. 45 is not enough to fully saturate 2 bases, let alone the fact that he's got a ton of them just kind of sitting in various locations. So that's definitely not the way to be going. The thing that he should be focused on at this point, knowing that the Terran really only has this one mining base, he doesn't know that. He should be a lot more aware of that fact. He should be checking bases down here to make sure that nothing is going on. But instead of attacking directly into this like he is, and in this case too, attacking into a planetary fortress at the same time he's attacking into the army, no, you're never going to win that. The actual army itself could be about half the size, and that planetary fortress is just so good. It's just amazingly good at splash damage, and it's just incredibly durable, let alone if he decided to pull these FCVs and actually start repairing the thing, it's damn near invincible. And if you've actually got an army there backing it up, you just absolutely can't win. You can't fight in this location. There's certain places that you just cannot fight a Terran player. If they set themselves up and say, this is where I am, that's it. Take their word for it, because that's where they are. You're going to have to find some other way to get to them. And in this type of game, the way to get to them is make sure that this never goes up in the first place. Make sure that nothing ever comes down here. You can do drops in the back. Don't forget that you have stuff like warp prisms. You can hit them in places that force them to unsiege. You can try and sneak around. Colossus can do a lot of harassment up and down this cliff that are going to make him either reposition siege tanks, split up his army, whatever. It's not a direct assault, but it's a harassment. So you just want to be starving the Terran out at this point. Make sure that he absolutely cannot move from this location. And if he doesn't get this command center up and running, which is totally preventable, there's nothing in the world stopping the Protoss player from bringing this type of army, which again is split into just multiple parts, and stopping this from coming up. All he has to do is poke up the ramp, bam, 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 kill the thing. It's not a planetary fortress or anything yet. There's a big window there, and this is 25 from being mined out. That's got 300 left, 400 left, 50, 60, 140. There's not much left here. He doesn't have a lot left in terms of legs to stand on here. And in fact, yeah, we see some of the mineral patches going and him transferring over. If he doesn't have this transfer over, he's absolutely broke. That's the end of the game, and he can't do anything with it. He's now then going to have to lift something off, find another base, something like that. But instead, we've got the Protoss player not really mining off his own natural, even though there's stuff left. We've got this oversaturated a couple times over. This is way too many. Some of these should definitely be back here, and then other bases should be going up. And then here we see the problem that I described earlier. We've got this force now. If you look at supplies, Protoss should actually be okay if you took his whole army and faced it against the whole army. But we've got it split into parts kind of all over the place. And so these absolutely get picked off because there's nothing to be in front of them. There's no zealots or anything there to absorb fire. And there's no heavy hitters like the Colossus around to do that. We've got one Colossus, two Colossus there. That Immortal's still in the back. This guy walks down individually because he just kind of move commanded it and didn't pay attention where anything was going. This kind of comes single file into the tank, takes a lot of damage, and then the whole army turns around. He's basically picked the entire thing off part by part by part by part, and then insult to injury just blinks in to get himself killed off completely. So again, the Protoss player was in a completely won situation for 25 minutes or so of this game, and a couple of very crucial mistakes, 3 really crucial mistakes, completely ruined it for him and just kind of threw it away. The first was the first major attack into this base. He had killed the probes there, killed off the actual base, and just stuck around way too long, letting Banshees pick him off, letting 3 tanks over here pick him off, just standing in tank fire while he was attacking the command center instead of just pulling back to a safe range, or just plain saying, I crushed his army, I did economic damage, I'm just going to go home and expand behind that and be content with that. He also wasn't reinforcing in or anything like that, so he lost that critical mass thing. If he had been able to warp in 7 to 10 more units definitely could have just overwhelmed the 3 tanks that are there, but that's not where he did, so he kind of lost the handle on it. The second time was just attacking into this big choked area, and with nothing but stalkers blinking right in front of a bunch of tanks and letting them get absolutely destroyed by infantry and splash damage. And another time just coming in with a bunch of things, including Colossus support, and getting just completely destroyed by this planetary fortress and everything around it. And the final nail in the coffin was allowing his army to be split up in multiple locations, and then ultimately attacking basically single file into this Terran ball. Thank you, Void Ray. Yes, go there as well. I'm gonna let him do that since I'm posting this anyway. Put your stream up, Void Ray. There you go. Flux Void Ray, great guy. I've been in a clan with him for quite a while. He does live stream on Protoss as well as doing coaching and lessons and stuff like that. So definitely check that link out as well. He certainly helped me out when I was starting to play, and still an excellent guy. He's like a high masters Protoss player, so check him out as well. So that was a fun little coincidence. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys.